All right, so you found your way here because you're the kind of person who likes to stay ahead of the curve.
You want to know what's really happening in the world of health and longevity research.
Exactly. And today we're diving deep into a really interesting study that caught our eye.
It's all about a naturally occurring compound called ergothioneine.
Ergothioneine.
It's often shortened to ergo.
Okay, ergo. So what's so special about this ergo? Why are we dedicating a whole deep dive to it?
Well, the study we're looking at today suggests that it might have some pretty remarkable effects on longevity and healthy aging.
Especially in mice.
Right, in mice, specifically male mice in this study, but that's where a lot of this research starts, and the findings are pretty compelling.
So let's break it down. The study is titled Ergothioneine Promotes Longevity and Healthy Aging in Male Mice.
Yep, and our mission here is to take you through the key findings, explain the science in plain English, and figure out why this research matters to you.
Especially if you're interested in, extending your own health span and maybe even lifespan.
Absolutely. So let's start with the big news. The study found that ergo supplementation significantly increased the lifespan of these male mice.
And we're not talking about a small increase either.
Right, this was pretty substantial. The researchers gave the mice ergo in their drinking water.
Every day.
Every day, starting at 7 weeks of age, which is relatively young for a mouse.
Like adolescence, I guess.
Yeah, something like that. And the dosage was about 4 to 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight.
Okay, so what happened? How much longer did these ergo mice live?
Well, the median lifespan of the mice that received ergo increased by 16% compared to the control group.
Okay, 16%. That's pretty good.
It is, but it gets even more impressive when you look at the average lifespan, which went up by 21%.
Wow, a full 21% longer on average just from adding ergo to their water.
Exactly. And here's another striking statistic. The age at which 90% of the mice died increased by a whopping 29% in the ergo group.
29%, that's huge.
Yeah.
Think about what that could mean if those results translated to humans.
Right. It's definitely something to pay attention to. And what's really interesting is that this longevity effect wasn't just observed in mice.
Oh, really? So they tested this in other animals, too?
Yeah, they looked at a model organism called Caenorhabditis elegans.
Caenorhabditis elegans.
I know, it's a mouthful. Basically, they're tiny roundworms that scientists often use in aging research because they have a short lifespan, which makes it easier to study these kinds of interventions.
Right. So what happened when they gave these roundworms ergo? Did they also live longer?
They did. They saw significant increases in both lifespan and what they called non-frailty span.
Non-frailty span, what's that?
Basically, it means they not only lived longer, but they also stayed healthier for a longer period of time. They weren't just lingering, they were active and thriving.
So they were like enjoying those extra years, not just, barely hanging on.
Exactly. And this suggests that ergo's effects might be tapping into some fundamental aging processes that are conserved across different species, from worms to mice.
And potentially to humans.
Potentially, yeah. That's the big question. And it's why these early findings are so exciting.
Okay, so we've established that ergo seems to have a positive effect on lifespan in these animal models. But as you said, it's not just about living longer, it's about living well.
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of frailty comes in.
Right, because you can live a long time.
Yeah.
But if you're frail and your body's not functioning well, those extra years might not be so enjoyable.
Exactly. And the researchers wanted to see if ergo had any impact on frailty as these mice aged.
So how do they measure frailty in mice?
They actually used a combination of factors that are similar to how we assess frailty in humans. They looked at things like how quickly the mice moved.
Okay, so their movement speed.
Yep, their overall activity level.
So were they up and about exploring, or were they kind of just staying put?
Right, and they also looked at whether the mice experienced any unintentional weight loss, which can be a sign of declining health.
So basically, they were looking for signs of physical decline as the mice got older.
Precisely, and what they found was that the control group, the mice that weren't getting ergo, started showing noticeable signs of aging in these areas by the time they reached 88 weeks old.
Okay, so at 88 weeks, these mice were getting up there in age.
Yeah, that's pretty old. For a mouse, they had lost weight, their fat mass had decreased, and both their average and maximum movement velocities had slowed down, meaning they weren't moving as quickly or as much as they used to.
So they were showing those classic signs of frailty.
Exactly. But here's the really interesting part. The mice that were receiving ergo experienced significantly less of this age-related decline.
Really, they were like holding on to their youth?
In a way, yeah. They maintained a healthier weight, they didn't lose as much fat mass, and they stayed more active and mobile.
So it sounds like ergo was helping them to stay more physically robust as they got older.
That's the suggestion, and it's pretty exciting, especially for those of us who are thinking about, maintaining our physical function and independence as we age.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Because nobody wants to end up frail and dependent.
Right, and this research suggests that ergo could potentially play a role in preventing or at least delaying that decline.
Okay, so we've talked about lifespan and frailty, but what about what's going on inside the body? Did the researchers look at any biological markers to see how ergo might be affecting things at a deeper level?
They did. They measured various plasma biomarkers in the mice.
Plasma biomarkers, those are like little signals in the blood that can tell us about different bodily functions, right?
Exactly. They're kind of like indicators of what's going on inside the body and how well things are working.
So what did these biomarkers reveal about the mice that were getting ergo?
Well, at 92 weeks, they found that several key biomarkers were significantly lower in the ergo supplemented group.
Lower, is that a good thing?
In this case, yes, it suggests that ergo might be helping to keep certain systems functioning more effectively as the mice aged.
So what were some of these biomarkers that were lower in the ergo group?
One was chemokine ligand 9, or CXCL9, which is associated with inflammation.
Inflammation, that's generally not a good thing.
No, it's often a sign of something being wrong in the body, and chronic inflammation is linked to many age-related diseases.
So lower CXCL9 suggests that ergo might be helping to reduce inflammation.
That's the idea. They also saw lower levels of creatinine, symmetric dimethylarginine, SDMA urea, and asymmetric dimethylarginine, ADMA.
Okay, I'll stop you there. I know we have some science-savvy listeners, but that's a lot of jargon.
Yeah.
What do those biomarkers tell us in plain English?
Fair enough. Those are all markers related to kidney function.
So lower levels of those would suggest that the kidneys are working better.
Exactly. And that's important because kidney function tends to decline with age.
Right, so it seems like ergo might be having a protective effect on the kidneys?
That's one interpretation, and they also observed reduced levels of quinolinic acid and kynurenine.
Okay, those are new ones. What are they all about?
Those are involved in a pathway called the kynurenine pathway, which is linked to inflammation and other physiological processes.
So again, lower levels suggest a healthier internal environment.
Exactly. It's like ergo is helping to keep things running smoothly inside the body.
Okay, so we've covered lifespan, frailty, and these internal biomarkers. But what about cognitive function? Did the researchers look at how ergo might be affecting the brain?
They did. They specifically looked at learning and memory using a test called the Novel Object Recognition Test, or NORT for short.
Okay. The Novel Object Recognition Test, how does that work?
It's actually pretty clever. It takes advantage of a mouse's natural curiosity.
Because mice are naturally curious little creatures.
They are. So basically, in this test, you show a mouse two identical objects, and they get to explore them, sniff them, check them out.
Okay, and then?
Then you take one of those objects away and replace it with a new object.
I see. So if the mouse remembers the original object, they'll spend more time exploring the new one because it's novel. It's interesting.
Exactly. It's like us being more intrigued by a new gadget than by the phone we've had for a year.
Right. So if the mouse spends more time with the new object, it suggests they have good memory.
Precisely. And that's exactly what they found in the mice that were supplemented with ergo.
Really? So the ergo mice had better memory?
Yes, they showed significantly better object recognition memory, and this was true for both young mice at 24 weeks and older mice at 88 weeks.
So it seems like ergo might have a positive effect on memory across the lifespan.
That's what the data suggests, and it's really encouraging, especially as we think about maintaining cognitive health as we age.
Absolutely, because memory decline is a big concern for a lot of people.
It is, and this research hints that ergo might have some neuroprotective properties.
Neuroprotective meaning it protects the brain.
Exactly, and the researchers didn't stop at just observing these effects on memory. They also wanted to investigate how ergo might be working in the brain at a cellular level.
So they dug even deeper.
They did. They explored a few potential mechanisms. One was hippocampal neurogenesis.
Hippocampal neurogenesis. Break that down for us.
Sure. So the hippocampus is a region of the brain that's crucial for learning and memory.
Okay. And neurogenesis means the birth of new neurons, right?
Exactly. So hippocampal neurogenesis is the process of generating new neurons in the hippocampus.
And this is important because...
Well, for a long time, scientists thought that we were born with all the neurons we'd ever have, but now we know that's not true.
So our brains can actually generate new neurons even as we age.
Yes, but the rate of neurogenesis tends to decline with age.
And that decline is thought to contribute to age-related cognitive decline.
Right, and what the researchers found in this study was that ergo seemed to counteract that typical age-related decline in hippocampal neurogenesis.
So even though the mice were getting older, The ergo was helping their brains to keep producing new neurons.
Exactly. They were looking at specific markers that indicate the presence of new neurons, and they found more of these markers in the ergo group as the mice aged.
Like ergo was helping to keep the brain's hardware up to date.
That's a great analogy, and they also looked at another interesting aspect of brain health, microglia.
Microglia, remind us what those are again.
Microglia are the brain's resident immune cells. They're kind of like the brain's own little defense force.
Okay, so they protect the brain from invaders.
Yes, but they also have other important roles in maintaining brain health.
And the researchers found that ergo had an effect on these microglia.
They did. Now, microglia can exist in different states, broadly speaking. They can be pro-inflammatory, which is called the M1 phenotype, or they can be anti-inflammatory and more supportive, which is called the M2 phenotype.
Okay, so M1 is like the attack mode, and M2 is more like the cleanup and repair mode.
That's a good way to think about it. And in this study, they found that ergo seemed to shift the balance of microglia in the hippocampus from the M1 to the M2 phenotype.
So more of the good guys, less of the bad guys.
In a sense, yeah, because an overactive or prolonged M1 response can actually contribute to neuroinflammation, which is linked to age-related cognitive decline.
So by promoting the M2 phenotype, ergo might be helping to create a healthier environment in the brain.
That's the thinking. And they also looked at one more thing in the brain related to protein buildup.
Oh, right, the TDP-43 protein aggregates.
Exactly. These are abnormal clumps of protein that have been linked to various neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's disease and ALS.
So not good things to have accumulating in your brain.
Definitely not. And what they found was that ergo reduced the accumulation of these TDP-43 aggregates in the aged mice.
So another point for ergo in terms of brain protection.
It seems to be acting on multiple levels, supporting neurogenesis, modulating the immune response, and reducing the buildup of potentially harmful proteins.
Pretty impressive for a naturally occurring compound found in food.
Right, it's pretty remarkable. And the researchers also had a hypothesis about how ergo might be influencing those microglial changes we were just talking about.
Oh, really? Tell us more.
Well, they focused on an enzyme called histamine and methyltransferase, or HNMT.
HNMT, got it. And what does this enzyme do?
It breaks down histamine, which is a signaling molecule that's involved in a lot of different processes in the body, including inflammation and immune responses.
Okay, and what does this have to do with ergo?
Well, they found that ergo can actually inhibit the activity of HNMT.
So it's like ergo is putting the brakes on this enzyme that breaks down histamine.
Exactly. And they even figured out how well ergo inhibits HNMT. In the mouse brain, they found an IC50 value of 83.8 micromolar.
Okay, for those of us who aren't biochemistry experts, what does that number mean?
It basically tells you how much ergo is needed to block 50% of the enzyme's activity, and in this case, it suggests that ergo is pretty effective at inhibiting HNMT.
Okay, so ergo blocks this enzyme that breaks down histamine. But how does that tie back to the brain and those microglia?
Well, by inhibiting HNMT, ergo could lead to increased levels of histamine in the brain.
And that's significant because...
Because histamine can actually influence microglial activity.
Really? So histamine is like a messenger that can tell the microglia what to do?
In a way, yeah. And they tested this in the lab by treating cultured microglia with both ergo and another known HNMT inhibitor called midoprine.
Midoprine, okay, and what happened?
They saw an increase in the markers associated with the anti-inflammatory M2 microglia.
So blocking HNMT either with ergo or midoprine seemed to push those microglia towards the beneficial M2 state.
Exactly. And this suggests that by influencing histamine levels, ergo might be promoting that shift in microglial activity, which could have positive effects on brain health.
It's like a domino effect. Ergo affects this enzyme, which affects histamine levels, which then affects these crucial brain immune cells.
It's a really fascinating potential mechanism, and it highlights how interconnected these biological pathways are.
Okay, so we've learned a lot about ergo's effects in mice, but this is a compound that's found in our food. So how safe is it, and how well do our bodies handle it?
That's a great question, and the researchers addressed this in the study. They emphasized that ergo is a naturally occurring compound that's present in various foods.
So it's not some synthetic chemical that they cooked up in a lab?
No, it's found naturally in mushrooms, for example, and also in things like beans and some meats.
Mushrooms, beans, meat. So it's not like you have to eat some weird exotic plant to get ergo.
Exactly. It's present in a variety of common foods, and importantly, they also pointed out that our bodies are equipped to absorb and transport ergo efficiently.
So we're designed to handle this compound.
It seems that way. We have a specific protein called OCTN1 that's responsible for transporting ergo into cells, and it's found in many different organs, including the brain, liver, and kidneys.
So that suggests that ergo can actually reach the tissues where it might exert its beneficial effects.
Right. And the study also made a brief comparison to other compounds that have shown lifespan extending effects in mice.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, they mentioned some of the interventions that are being studied in the National Institute on Aging's Interventions testing program.
That's a big program, right?
Yeah, it's a really comprehensive effort to identify and evaluate compounds that might extend lifespan and health span in mammals.
And how did ergo compare to those other interventions?
They highlighted that ergo appeared to be effective at relatively low doses, and it seemed to have a favorable safety profile compared to some other interventions that might require much higher concentrations or have more potential for side effects.
So ergo is kind of standing out as a potentially safe and effective way to promote longevity.
It's looking promising, but of course it's important to remember that the study did have some limitations.
Right. Every study has limitations. What were some of the key ones in this case?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the study focused on male mice, so we need more research to understand if the effects would be the same in females.
That's a really important point because often there are sex differences in how these kinds of interventions work.
Absolutely. They also used a single test to assess cognitive function, so it would be good to see if the results hold up with other cognitive tests.
Right, because there are many different aspects of cognitive function.
Exactly. And their examination of general aging markers was somewhat limited. They focused on a few key biomarkers, but there are many others that could be investigated.
So there's definitely room for more research to get a more complete picture of ergo's effects.
Absolutely, but the findings so far are really intriguing.
And there's one more thing I want to mention that I found interesting. The researchers themselves acknowledged that the control group's diet might have actually influenced the results. Really, how so?
Well, the control diet had lower levels of ergo than typical mouse chow, and it also had a higher fat content.
So it's possible that the control group's diet wasn't ideal for longevity.
That's a possibility, and it highlights the complexity of studying aging and the importance of carefully considering all the factors involved.
Absolutely, because diet can have a huge impact on health and lifespan.
No doubt about it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the big takeaway from this research on ergothioneine?
I think the key message is that this study provides compelling evidence suggesting that ergothioneine has significant potential for promoting both longevity and healthy aging.
At least in my...
Right, in mice so far. But the effects they observed were pretty remarkable, from extending lifespan to improving physical vitality and cognitive function.
And it seems to be working through multiple pathways, influencing neurogenesis, modulating the immune response, reducing protein buildup.
It's a multifaceted compound with a lot of potential, and for those of you who are interested in understanding the science of aging and exploring potential strategies for healthy aging, this research offers a really fascinating look at a natural compound with some remarkable effects.
It's definitely something to keep an eye on, and it raises some important questions for future research.
Absolutely. Like, how well do these findings translate to humans? What are the optimal doses? And what are the long-term effects of ergo supplementation?
Those are all great questions, and it also makes you think about your own diet and lifestyle choices.
Exactly. Are you getting enough ergothioneine-rich foods like mushrooms and beans? Could increasing your intake have a positive impact on your health and longevity?
These are all things to ponder, and we encourage you to do your own research and talk to your healthcare provider to see if ergo supplementation might be right for you.
And stay tuned for more updates on this exciting field of research, because as we learn more about the science of aging, we gain more power to make informed choices about our health.
Exactly. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep striving for a long and healthy life.
That's what it's all about.
And we'll be here to guide you along the way.
Until next time,
Stay curious.
stay healthy.